Those contracts were then taken to court, and 3 lawyers that we had never hired, and we never heard about any court hearings, had showed up to defend our 3 stolen companies. But instead of defending the companies, they pled guilty and created $1 billion of court judgments against our 3 stolen companies. At this point, the police then raided all of our banks looking for our assets. And we were very fortunate because after I got kicked out of Russia, we moved all of our assets out of the country. So there was nothing there for them to take. But it wasn't the end of their plan. The most important part of the discovery of Sergei Magnitsky's investigation was after they didn't come up with any assets at our banks, they then went to the tax authorities with our stolen companies. And they went to the tax authorities and said, these companies that made $1 billion of profits last year and paid $230 million of taxes, they said that was a mistake. Look, here's $1 billion of losses from the court. We'd like that $230 million taxes paid refunded to us. They applied for a tax refund on the 23rd of December 2007, and the tax refund was granted the very next day on Christmas Eve. The largest refund in Russian tax history, granted in one day, no audit, no questions asked. So obviously the tax officials, the police, and organized criminals were all working together in this amazing, unbelievable crime. We file criminal complaints with every law enforcement agency in Russia. But instead of opening a criminal case against the criminals, the police opened criminal cases against all 7 of our lawyers. I call them up and I say to each lawyer, it's time to get out of the country. I said, come to London, we'll get you visas, we'll get you homes, we'll take care of you. It's not safe to be in Russia. We were able to evacuate 6 of our 7 lawyers from 4 different law firms. But one of our lawyers, Sergei Magnitsky, didn't want to go. He came from a different generation. The other lawyers were in their 40s and 50s, and they had seen the evil of the Soviet times. Sergei was 36 years old, and he wasn't conscious of the evil of the Soviet era. Sergei was a new Russian, he was an optimist, and he believed that Russia had changed. And he said, I haven't broken any laws, I'm not leaving, and moreover, these people have stolen $230 million from my country, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. And so Sergei stayed in Moscow. He stayed in Moscow, and he testified against the officers who were involved in the raid that led to the theft of the companies and the theft of the $230 million. He testified in October of 2008. 1 month after his testimony, the same officers came to his home at 8 in the morning in front of his wife and 2 children and arrested him. They arrested him and put him in pretrial detention, and they started to torture him to withdraw his testimony. First, they put him into a cell with 8 inmates and 4 beds and left the lights on 24 hours a day to deprive him of sleep. After they softened him up with that, they came to him and asked him if he would withdraw his testimony and plead guilty to a number of fabricated crimes, including the theft that they had committed. He refused. They then put him in a cell with no window panes, open to the elements in December in Moscow in the winter, so there was not any heat in the cell. He got very sick from being in a cell that was freezing. They then put him in a cell with no toilet, just a hole in the floor where sewage would bubble up. All the time as they were moving him from cell to cell, they would then lose his belongings. And his most precious belonging was one of those metal coil devices that you plug into the wall that you can then put into water to boil water. And the reason it was so valuable is that that's the only way you can drink water from the prison faucet, because the water is contaminated. And by losing his boiling instrument, he basically had to drink contaminated water. After 6 months of this, Sergei Magnitsky lost 40 pounds, got very, very sick, went to the prison hospital where they diagnosed him as having pancreatitis and gallstones. And they said that you're going to need an operation. They prescribed him an operation which was supposed to happen in the first week of August 2009. 1 week before his operation was due, they asked him to withdraw his testimony and confess to this series of fabricated crimes that he didn't do. He refused, and instead of giving him an operation, they abruptly moved him from Matroshka Tishina prison to Butyrka prison, which is a maximum security prison, one of the harshest in Russia, and a prison that has no medical facilities. And at Butyrka, his health completely broke down. He went into convulsions, into pain, unimaginable pain. He applied for medical attention on 20 different occasions, officially through all different channels, to the prosecutor, to the investigators, to everybody. He was either ignored or denied. His cellmate would bang on the door for hours to try to get medical attention for him because he was in such excruciating pain, and they just ignored the banging. And on the night of November 16th, 2009, he went into critical condition. It was only then that they moved him back to Matroshka Tishina, which had a hospital. But instead of treating him at Matroshka Tishina, they put him into a straitjacket, put him in an isolation room, and waited outside the door for 1 hour and 18 minutes until he died. He was 37 years old. He left a wife and 2 children. The reason that I know the details of his situation was that while he was incarcerated, he wrote 450 complaints in his 358 days in detention. Everybody has their own way of dealing with adversity, and Sergei's way was writing it down and complaining about it. Not complaining as a complainer, but complaining as a lawyer finding injustice in the law. He filed those complaints, and they were arrogantly ignored them. But what they didn't understand was that every complaint that he filed, we got a copy of. And so on the morning that we learned of his death, we released a document, which was one of the complaints, which is a 40-page handwritten note or letter to the general prosecutor describing these things I've just told you about. We released that, and Novaya Gazeta newspaper, which is the big opposition newspaper in Moscow, looked at this, and they were so shocked that they decided to break it into seven pieces and call it Sergei's Prison Diary, and they put it on the front page of the newspaper. And this electrified the Russian population. They had never seen anything. The Russian population is an extremely cynical and pessimistic, thick-skinned group of people, but this went beyond all reasonableness. To take a man who bought his Starbucks coffee in the morning, who sat in his cubicle doing tax law, and plucking him out of his normal upper-middle-class life and putting him in the most horrific dungeon and torturing him to death over a 1-year period at the age of 37 was something that the Russian population just couldn't accept. And as a result, the independent newspapers, the blogs, the internet just went crazy with anger and indignation. And the president of Russia was forced to call an investigation into the death of Sergei Magnitsky about a week after he died. We're now 11 months after he died, after the president called for an investigation, and not a single person has been prosecuted in this crime. In fact, the 3 people who were most directly involved have been promoted. And so one of the reasons that I'm here is that I'm going around the world in all different formats and all different forums to tell this story. And I tell this story because I think everybody needs to know this story. This is a story of unbelievable cruelty, and it's also a story of unbelievable bravery and integrity. And my next stop is LA, where I'm going to tell this story to Hollywood producers because we're going to make a movie out of it. But my way of fighting this horrible injustice is to make sure that the entire world knows who Russia is, what they're doing, and as we're busy talking about resetting our relationships with them, which is what the United States foreign policy is at the moment, it needs to be factored in that we're resetting relationships with essentially a murderous regime. And so I'm going to leave it there. I've already gone 8 minutes over my allotted time, but I thank you very much for hearing the story.